All right, boys, we're on our way to the Nvidia booth. We're gonna check out some 5090s. From left to right, we got the 5070, 5080, and the 5090. Now, let's just get straight into it here. The 5090 Founders Edition is legit a 2-slot. Now, if you look at the underside here of the card, it has a dual blow-through design. So it's pushing air through the card on both sides, which makes no sense. Now, how could they possibly have done this? Well, what they actually did is they put the PCB in the middle here. You see this kind of like line right here? And this line right here, the PCB is in the center, and then there's kind of like two daughter boards that attach to it, right? So this is the PCB in the center, and then one daughter board here for the PCI Express slot, and then it goes down, 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 and then one daughter board goes up like this for the display port and the HDMI ports. So for the Founders Edition specifically, this does not include AIB models. They took the one big PCB and chopped it up into 3 to make it work so that they can actually make this into a 2-slot. Now, on the topic of 2-slot graphics cards, we will be back, but these are all of the partner models of cards, including the ones from Europe and the Asian markets, right? And all of the 5090 variants of the partner models, there is nothing even close to resembling a 2-slot. So if you are looking for a small form factor 2-slot 5090, you're gonna have to go with the Founders Edition. Now, there will be liquid-cooled models from AIBs that are 2-slot as well, but they will have radiators attached to them, right? Now let's quickly talk about the performance of the 5090. Now you gotta be a little careful when it comes to the benchmarks that you're gonna see here coming up, or the ones that you already have seen, because the 5090, I asked and I clarified it, it has a 575 watt power limit, and that's not with the afterburner slider slid all the way to the right where it's like the max performance. No. It has 575 out of the box. Now, why does that matter? Because basically when the benchmarks come out going forward, you're gonna see something similar to what happened with the 2080 Ti and the 3080, where the 2080 Ti had like a 225 watt kind of power limit, and the 3080 had 375 watts, right? So a lot of that performance gain was the power limit increase. So, but it is to say that you're going to need a beefy ass power supply for this bad boy. But so in terms of SM counts and memory bus bandwidth and all that, SM count I believe is 170 for this one. The 4090 is 128. Now if you do the math, that is about 32%. So my prediction, if you're looking at max overclock versus max overclock, no power limits, 4090 versus 5090, you're probably gonna get, I would say, 25 to 30% non-ray tracing, non-DLSS performance. Now, when it comes to the 5080, it's a very similar story as well. So the 5080 is a 16 gigs, and it has a 256-bit bus, and it has 84 CUs, right? Which is only 4 more than the 4080 Super, but this bad boy has a power limit of an extra 100 watts, right? So if you're talking about rasterization performance only, the 5080 versus the 4080, if you remove the power limits on both of them, it's gonna be within 5% of a 4080 Super when they're both pulling the same power. It's gonna be very, very similar. We were actually having this argument in the Discord earlier today, where if you just remove your emotions from the equation and just do the math, it's 170 divided by 128, 4090 versus 5090. It's 84 divided by 80 for the 5080 and the 4080 Super. It's as simple as that. Now, we also have to keep in mind, though, that they extracted an extra 30% performance, and they cut the card size in half. And you could even say they cut the PCB size in half as well. There are a lot of engineering, like wizardries going on here, but in terms of sheer performance versus sheer performance, you know what you're getting. If I do manage to get one of these, I will try to disassemble it so that we can actually try to see what is going on the inside and get that 3 PCB daughter board thing, because I'm actually super curious to see how that works. Now, it's not rocket science that the 5090 is going to cost $2,000 and the 5080 is going to cost $1,000. Why is the pricing gap like that? Double the memory bandwidth, and literally double the CU count. Everything about this card is double. Now, the 4090 is basically right in the middle of both of these, and it's $1,600. So Nvidia's not dumb. They know what they're doing. So it's like, it completely slots right in here. So you could say the 4090 is kind of like a 5080 Ti. They definitely left room in here for another card or a super refresh going forward, right? You basically have almost, 90 SMs gap between these two cards. Now, if you are a follower of mine and you are if you're watching this video, now is the time to go on the marketplace and buy a 4090. You tell those people 5070 is going to be faster than 4090. You tell them that, you say the 4090 is a paperweight and it's a dead card, and you offer them $700, $800. And if you can pick one up, you just got a hell of a steal. Because as soon as the benchmarks actually come out and it shows that the 4090 slots right in between here, now the value of 4090s is going to go back up. But until that happens, I think it's like January 30th is the embargo or something like that. Until that, you have about 20 days to pick up a 4090 for dirt cheap. Now's the time. Now, for the folks that are saying the 5070 is going to be faster than the 4090, et cetera, they actually have a demo over here showing that very thing. Okay, now this is the Jensen Marketing that I was talking about earlier. So the right side here, this is Marvel Rivals. The right side here, I didn't actually know they had DLSS in Marvel Rivals, but the right side here, this is a 5070 with all the DLSS turned on, right? Frame rate is 232. Then the left side over here is a 4090 with DLSS 3 enabled, and then there you go. So the performance boost that you're getting with Blackwell is definitely going to be that. Anything kind of AI related is going to have a huge uptick on Blackwell, right? So when you see benchmarks in the future, make sure you read the fine print so that you know what DLSS version the reviewer is doing, so that you can get a proper barometer of. So there's so many versions of DLSS now, and there's so many different technologies of upscalers. So it's up to the reviewer to be very transparent with their audience to kind of make that shit legit, you know what I'm saying? But the goal of this display, again, is to highlight how much faster the new architecture can go with DLSS 4, right? Okay, now for us esports players, this demo is called, they're coming out with a new feature called Reflex 2, right? Now, okay, so basically the point here is if you know what Reflex 1 does, it basically drops your GPU usage to like 98% and kind of locks it there, so that when you actually move the mouse, it's not having to wait for the graphics card to load the next frame in order to response on the screen, right? Now, at the top right here, you can see how it says Reflex off, right? And then at the top left here, you can see the latency is 44 milliseconds. So this is with the graphics card completely maxed out at 99% usage, right? So you never want to play your esports games with your GPU at 99% usage. So they got this demo here where if I press this button, now it says Reflex 1, which is the reflex that we all know. Now it's turned on, right? And then the latency dropped to 18 milliseconds. Now, basically, the graphics card is kind of locked at like 98, 97% usage. That's how Reflex 1 works. And let me tell you, I can 100% tell, like that's a significant latency drop, right? Now, here is what Reflex 2 does. It just kind of turned on. That's what the flash was, right? But Reflex 2 is available on 50 series for now, but it will be available to all RTX cards in the future. It's not a Blackwell exclusive feature, but so Reflex 2 is on. I'll explain what it does in a sec. And the latency dropped by another 9-ish milliseconds. Now, what Reflex 2 actually does is it will actually interrupt the last frame that is rendered and give priority to the mouse. So, for those of you hardware junkies, you can kind of see where an issue would lie with that, right? So, let me explain. Because the graphics card is actually hijacking the frame, if you, in Reflex 2 mode, if I move the mouse really quickly, right, you probably wouldn't be able to catch, I'm recording in 60 FPS, so you wouldn't be able to catch it, right? But if I move the mouse real quick, there's no way. Basically, what happens is the graphics card doesn't know what's over here beyond the monitor, right? So when you move the mouse if you do like a flick shot over here, AI, the new Reflex 2 AI, has to fill in what it thinks is going to show up, right? Now, I was playing with this a little earlier, and when I was doing flick shots earlier, I could tell that there was maybe a little bit of ghosting and tearing because it's hijacking the frame, right? Now, it's going to come down to a judgment call on the player whether or not the latency reduction is worth the potential screen tear of having the graphics card hijack the next frame, right? Well, now, I did suggest to them that maybe if they can turn off the AI portion of it. So what they were telling me was, if they don't have AI fill in the next frame, when you actually go to whip the mouse, what would happen is there would be like a white bar on the left. There would just be no information of what's on the left side of the screen. So your choices would be having pixels missing because the frame got hijacked, or AI tries to fill it in, right? But the end goal of all of that is to try and get your latency down to basically instantaneous, right? Now, this is like an engineering sample. It's in the works. I'm sure they can improve all that kind of stuff going forward, but it's just very, very, very intriguing technology that now we have direct control over injecting frames to try and get the lowest latency we can and compete. So in this demo here, they're actually showing Wukong Mac settings, and the whole point of it is to show off DLSS 4, right? But they're showing off 5090 Mac settings on the left, and it's like at 29 FPS, right? And then with DLSS 4, it's 10 timesing the FPS, right? But I will say though, just playing around with it, they got some new training model. I don't remember what it's called. They have a new training model for DLSS, and I used to not like it. It still looks a bit fuzzy, but it's definitely way better than it used to. It doesn't look like a Vaseline fest, I want to say, if you guys remember the old DLSS models. Okay, so here is the new training model that I was talking about earlier. So on the left here, well, DLSS 3.5, they call this training model CNN. And then on the right here, DLSS 4, they call this training model Transformer. Now, the difference is, I'm not sure if my camera would even pick it up, honestly, but it's basically the exact same on both of them. We're ignoring the FPS for now, we're going with image quality. The training model affects the image quality, not the FPS, right? But let me try and see if I can focus here. If you look at the fan right here, I'm not sure if my camera's picking it up, honestly, but if you look at the fan and there's like shimmering on the boards, on the wood there, right? And if you go over here, the shimmering's gone. That's the most noticeable thing that I found. So again, basically, the new algorithm that they're training on just kind of, again, my eyes are just super sensitive to that shit. Maybe most people wouldn't even notice, but it basically makes it from unplayable to playable for me, right? So this, I can 100% play. I don't see any shimmering and no weird oddities, right? Honestly, that's pretty much it for the Nvidia booth. We're not too concerned with laptops on our channel, but if you want me to come back and check any of this stuff out, let me know. But otherwise, yeah, the Reflex, the 5090, the 5080, the Reflex, and the DLSS 4 is where it's at.